Peter Zeihan is one of the most vocal critics of Bitcoin, and I like to face criticism. I like to look at the arguments and see, is there something substantial behind them? Because this is how you get true conviction. You don't just blindly follow, you weigh the pros and the cons and discover potential weaknesses. Now, Peter Zeihan went on Joe Rogan when Bitcoin was still at 16,000. So this particular clip didn't really age well for him, but it recently popped up in Twitter again. And so I want to comment on this just right now. It's just a few minutes of a clip and I will interrupt in between.
No intrinsic value to this asset. And now it's starting to be priced appropriately. So it has a, what's Bitcoin at? 16,000? It has another 17,000 to go down.
Duh. Really?
Yeah, there's no intrinsic value to this product.
Okay, so obviously he's very biased here. He's already setting the stage. He's putting the word asset in quotation mark. The question really is, what is an asset? Is a painting by a famous artist an asset? Was it an asset when the painter wasn't yet famous? Does it become an asset? Where's the line between what is an asset and what is not an asset? I believe an asset is whatever people are willing to pay for. And that's already a pretty narrow definition. One might consider even clean air an asset, and you don't pay for clean air. So putting this word asset in quotation marks is obviously to make a statement. Saying that the price can go down 17,000 when it's currently at 16,000 is the same thing. It's simply just to show how much anti-Bitcoin Peter Zeihan is here. But let's look at the arguments.
And do you think that people have just inherently lost faith in the idea behind crypto because of FTX?
Well, it became an ideology. And whenever you invest based on an ideology, you're going to make some decisions that are a little divorced from math.
And what do you mean by ideology?
Well, the people who really like crypto are convinced that it's the currency of the future and that a decentralized ledger is the way to go, and that anything that is controlled by a government entity is by definition a negative, and if it's done by the private sector freely, it will be better. And that's just not how currency works. Currency is a method of exchange and a store of value. And for that, there has to be a degree of trust, and you have to have it managed in terms of volume.
It's true, there is an ideology behind Bitcoin, and it's true that most people that hold Bitcoin do not trust governments that much. But is this actually a negative? The opposite of that would be that there's no ideology behind this. So people wouldn't get in this because they trust in this with their core values. They would simply just adopt opportunistically. But is that really the more stable approach to things? I don't think so. I'd argue that ideology is actually the main driver why fiat currencies still survive, because they don't have intrinsic value as well. And there's even an additional argument here, right? What is even intrinsic value? Is intrinsic value that you can do something with it independent from trade. So let's say you have corn or you have cattle. That might have intrinsic value because you can use it, you can eat it, you can get milk from it, whatever, right? You don't have to trade it to benefit from this. This could be what people ascribe to with intrinsic value. But for example, with gold, right? Do you really have intrinsic value in gold? This is already pretty questionable, right? Because you could make jewelry out of gold, but that's again just a store of value, just a pretty way of store of value. Same with a Picasso painting, for example, right? Is it really worth millions and millions of dollars just because it hangs on the wall? I don't think so, right? It's again an investment. It's again a store of value. So we are very far gone from only trading things that can be used by themselves. We already have representations of purchasing power in all kinds of forms. Bitcoin is no different here. There is nothing special about it. And if we accept that there's actually no intrinsic value, so value that you can use by itself in fiat or in the numbers in the computer screen, in your bank account or in Bitcoin, if that's already accepted, then the only question is, what is then the better medium of exchange, the better store of value? Is that really a government-controlled fiat currency where governments get thrown over all the time, where the money gets printed by, on average, 6.5% per annum? That's how much USM2 expands on average every year. Is that better than a store of value that doesn't expand as quickly, that actually even net shrinks? Because you do have the mining in Bitcoin, but more Bitcoin gets lost. So the actual purchasable Bitcoin is getting smaller over time. It stores value better. And on top of that, you don't have exposure to a single government anymore. You're diversified away from governments. And yes, one might call this ideology ideology. I simply call this risk diversification. I was born in East Germany, and East Germany as a country completely collapsed, and with it, its currency as well. There's countless of examples of fiat currencies failing. I think the average lifetime of a fiat currency is around 30 years. If you're based in the US, you might not notice it that much, but over time still, you will get diluted. Bitcoin is international, and Bitcoin protects from all of those failing currencies, which is the majority. Most currencies even lose against the US dollar that's already expanding 6.5% every single year. Let's continue.
Craziest things about Bitcoin is that there will never be more than X number of units of Bitcoin. Well, by default, that means it can't be used for trade, because the whole idea of economic activity is that there's expansion, which means you need more currency to lubricate and manage that expansion.
Okay, so first of all, he obviously doesn't mean monetary inflation, but monetary deflation, as in the prices go down relative to a denominator. But that's besides the point. I think we pretty much agree on this, that he simply just named this wrongly here. I'd like to argue the point that we need inflation, monetary inflation, to accommodate for the growth. I believe that monetary inflation is nothing but a secret tax on the people that can't protect themselves from it. The government makes money by issuing bonds that pay less than the monetary inflation. The rich elite knows how to play the game to benefit from all of this. They take on a lot of debt, for example, on property, making that debt devalue over time, having maybe a 20-80 split, 20% down payment, 80% debt. And then they simply just see how the debt devalues, how the house price relative to that ever devaluing fiat currency also gets devalued. The main problem with crypto YouTube is conflict of interest. Too many YouTubers shill garbage, promote garbage, and fill up their pockets in the background. Not this channel. Instead, there's simply the offer where I share my skills, my perspectives to you, and where I also share direct access to me, where you can ask me any questions. Feel free to check it out. The premium membership link is down below. What is monetary expansion really doing? What's happening when the US money supply is increasing by 6.5%? It keeps a lot of companies alive that should not be alive anymore. If a company has a return on equity of maybe, say, 5%, right? It makes 5% profit relative to its equity, but the money supply is actually expanding by 6.5%, that company didn't really make any profit. But people think it did. The company will continue to operate for a long, long time. Nobody notices. Everything is fine. So what ends up happening is that more people will stay employed in those inefficient companies. In other words, the majority potentially of all employment might not even make any money, might not even make any profit. And that's again meant after monetary expansion. So yes, a lot of economic activity might die if there was no monetary inflation. But maybe when the pressure is high enough, new companies will spring up and become more efficient. This is usually how it happens, right? Because right now, what situation do we have? We've got so many corporate jobs that all do bullshit work, right? They do work that doesn't add anything to society. And I believe the only reason why those bullshit jobs can exist is because this is masked away, because a company that makes 3 or 4% profit on their equity still keeps on running.
So because of the lack of Bitcoin, because there's a certain controlled number, the only thing that can happen is Bitcoin becomes more expensive.
Right. And that means that the people who hold it are the ones that make the money, but everyone else suffers? I'm sorry, that's not viable.
Oh yes, I do think it is. What Bitcoin does is it incentivizes saving. It does not incentivize spending money on bullshit. It incentivizes people to actually contribute to society without taking too much out of society, right? This is what saving means. It means you do something, you get something in return, you get your Bitcoin in return, and you don't necessarily spend this on society again. You simply continue hoarding it, and in the end that's a net positive. Imagine most people would be incentivized to actually save. Yes, it would reduce economic activity, but it would also reduce all the waste. This is why some Bitcoin maximalists also call Bitcoin the currency that creates peace, because a lot of war is again financed through debt. If governments can't take that much debt anymore, if governments can't introduce this hidden tax to the average Joe, then potentially financing all of those wars might also go down. So if Bitcoin really succeeds in the end, it might make sense to buy a short on Lockheed Martin. Imagine there was way less funds available to buy all those tanks and all those fighter jets and all those fighter drones. Would that really be a worse world? Call me idealistic, but I believe that's better for everyone.
The alternative is you have some private dude out there who generates the coins on a whim. How is that different from the monetary reserve or the monetary authorities that we have at the Federal Reserve, except for the point that there's no accountability?
Show me how the Federal Reserve is not private. Show me how the Federal Reserve has any oversight or any accountability whatsoever. It doesn't exist. The Federal Reserve was founded by an aggregate of private banks. It's the definition of a cartel. It's a definition of market manipulation, in this case, for interest rates that then trickle through to all kinds of other economies, not just within the US, right? Because other countries have to compete with that interest rate. Please let me know if you enjoy this kind of video. It was a bit different to other videos, so please leave a comment down below. If it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. There's also a free Telegram. Link is down below.